Boardroom Media.
Imagine building the technology that will eventually destroy your own business, and then watching someone else take the future from you. Sounds impossible, right? But that's exactly what happened to Kodak. For generations, Kodak wasn't just a camera company. It was photography. If you wanted to take a picture, Kodak was everywhere. Families bought Kodak film. Photographers trusted Kodak. Millions of people knew the name. The company had built an enormous business around one simple idea. Take a picture. Buy film. Develop the film. Print the picture. And then do it all again. The system was incredibly profitable, because every photograph created another opportunity to sell film. And Kodak wasn't sitting around waiting for the future to arrive. It was actually one of the companies closest to it. In 1975, a Kodak engineer named Steve Sasson built something that looked almost ridiculous. A camera, without film. Instead of storing a photograph on film, the device captured the image electronically. It was one of the earliest digital cameras. The machine was huge. It weighed several kilograms. The image quality was terrible by modern standards. And it took a long time to record a single photograph. But the important part wasn't how good the camera was. It was what the camera represented. Photography was changing. And Kodak had seen it. The company had the technology. It had the engineers. It had the money. It had the brand. It had millions of customers. It had almost everything a company could possibly need to dominate the next generation of photography. There was just one problem. Digital photography threatened the very business that had made Kodak powerful. Because if people stopped buying film, what happened to Kodak? For decades, Kodak had made money every time someone took a photograph. Digital photography threatened to remove that entire cycle. No film. No film processing. Fewer prints. A completely different business model. And this is where Kodak's story becomes much more interesting. Because Kodak didn't simply fail to notice the future. Kodak saw the future coming. The real question was, why didn't it move fast enough? Kodak's problem wasn't technology. It was success. The company had spent decades building one of the strongest businesses in photography. Its film business was enormous. Its brand was trusted. Its distribution network was powerful. Its customers were loyal. And its profits depended heavily on the traditional photography ecosystem. So imagine sitting in a boardroom and being told, "We have a technology that could eventually make our most profitable product unnecessary." That's not an easy decision. Because adopting digital photography didn't simply mean launching a new product. It meant potentially destroying the business that was already making billions. And this is one of the most dangerous situations a successful company can face. When your biggest source of income is also the biggest obstacle to your future. Kodak continued investing in digital technology. It wasn't completely asleep. The company produced digital cameras. It worked on digital imaging. It even understood that photography was moving away from traditional film. But understanding a threat and completely reorganizing your company around that threat are two different things. Kodak was caught between two worlds. The old world was still profitable. The new world was growing. And whenever the old world is still making money, abandoning it feels dangerous. Why destroy something that works? Why move customers away from a product they already love? Why sacrifice billions in existing revenue for a future that isn't guaranteed? That's the trap. And Kodak wasn't the only company to fall into it. But digital photography didn't wait for Kodak to become comfortable. The technology improved. Digital cameras became smaller. Image quality increased. Memory became cheaper. Computers became common. Then the internet changed how people shared photographs. And eventually, the phone in your pocket became a camera. Suddenly, photography wasn't something you needed a separate device for. It was already with you. Everywhere. The competition wasn't just coming from traditional camera companies anymore. Companies like Canon, Nikon, Sony and others pushed aggressively into digital photography. And then came the smartphone revolution. Now people weren't just taking digital photographs. They were taking them instantly, editing them instantly, and sharing them instantly. The entire photography experience was changing. Kodak's old advantage was becoming less valuable. The film, the processing, the physical prints, the entire ecosystem that once made Kodak incredibly powerful, was becoming less important. And eventually, the numbers began telling the story. Kodak filed for bankruptcy protection in 2012. The company that had once seemed almost synonymous with photography was now fighting for survival. And here's the painful part. The technology that helped trigger this transformation wasn't something Kodak had never heard of. Kodak had been there from the beginning. It had seen digital photography coming decades earlier. But seeing the future isn't enough. You have to be willing to sacrifice part of the present to build it. And that's where Kodak lost. Kodak's collapse isn't really a story about cameras. It's a story about fear. Fear of destroying your own successful business. Fear of losing today's customers. Fear of investing heavily in something that might not work. And perhaps most importantly, fear of becoming the company that kills its own product. But here's the irony. If Kodak had aggressively destroyed its film business itself, someone else eventually would have done it anyway. That's one of the hardest lessons in business. If your own company doesn't disrupt your business, your competitor eventually might. The future doesn't care how successful you were yesterday. It doesn't care how loyal your customers are. It doesn't care how much money your existing business makes. Technology changes. Customer behavior changes. And companies that refuse to change with them can become victims of their own success. Kodak had the brand. It had the technology. It had the resources. It had the opportunity. What it didn't have was the willingness to completely let go of the business that made it successful. And that's what makes Kodak's story so painful. It wasn't a company that couldn't see the future. It was a company that saw the future, but struggled to fully embrace it. Today, Kodak's name still exists. But the company no longer holds the position it once had in photography. The giant that once helped define how the world captured memories became a warning about what happens when yesterday's success becomes more important than tomorrow's opportunity. And maybe that's the real lesson. You don't always lose because you're bad. Sometimes, you lose because you're too comfortable being good at what worked yesterday. The market doesn't reward companies for protecting their past. It rewards companies that understand where their customers are going next. So the next time you see an old giant disappear, don't just ask, "Why did they fail?" Ask something more uncomfortable. What are they protecting right now that the future is about to make irrelevant? Because Kodak's greatest mistake wasn't inventing digital photography. It was failing to understand that sometimes the biggest threat to your business is the future you've already invented.
This was Boardroom Media. We'll see you behind the next boardroom door.